When a dying orphan's final wish leads a hardened ranch owner to a hidden grave by the river, he uncovers a conspiracy that forces him to choose between his empire and his soul. The smell hit Samuel Iron Sam Garrett first, sweet decay mixed with prairie dust and the metallic tang of dried blood. His weathered hands gripped the reins tighter as his horse shifted nervously beneath the scorching Arizona sun of 1887. 20 yards ahead, buzzards circled lazily above what remained of a burned-out wagon, their shadows dancing across the cracked earth like omens of death. Sam's jaw clenched. Another family hadn't made it through Apache territory. Another reminder that the frontier took more than it gave, especially from those foolish enough to travel alone through his stretch of the Sonoran Desert. He dismounted slowly, his spurs jingling against the silence. The wagon's canvas top hung in charred tatters, and scattered belongings told the story of desperate flight. A child's doll with singed hair, a family Bible with pages fluttering in the hot wind, a woman's bonnet trampled into the dust. But it was the sound that stopped him cold. Soft, barely human. A whisper that might have been wind through the wagon's broken ribs, except wind didn't sob. Sam drew his Colt .45, thumb on the hammer. In 30 years of frontier life, he'd learned that survivors were often more dangerous than the dead. Desperation made people do terrible things. Hello. His voice cut through the desert stillness like a blade. The sobbing stopped. Sam circled the wagon, boots crunching on broken glass and scattered grain. Behind the rear wheel, partially hidden by a torn piece of canvas, he found her. A girl. Maybe 10 years old, maybe 12. Starvation had a way of stealing years from a child's face. Her dress, once blue, was now the color of dried blood and desert sand. Matted blonde hair hung across hollow cheeks, and her blue eyes held the kind of emptiness that came from seeing too much death too young. But she was alive. Barely. Easy there, little one. Sam holstered his weapon and knelt beside her, noting the way she clutched something against her chest. A smaller bundle wrapped in what looked like a torn petticoat. What's your name? The girl's lips moved but no sound came. Sam reached for his canteen, tilting it carefully to let water trickle between her cracked lips. She drank greedily, some of the life returning to her eyes. Sarah, she whispered finally. Sarah Mitchell. Well, Sarah Mitchell, looks like you've had yourself quite an adventure. Sam kept his voice gentle, the way he'd learned to speak to spooked horses. Where's your family? Sarah's grip tightened on the bundle, and Sam realized with growing horror what she was holding. The small, still form wrapped in blood-stained cloth. The tiny hand that hung limp and pale. This is Emma, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. She's my sister. She was only 6. Sam's throat constricted. He'd seen plenty of death in his time, war, disease, violence, but something about the way this child spoke of her dead sister, with such matter-of-fact acceptance, cut him deeper than any bullet ever had. Sarah, I need to ask you something and I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me? She nodded. What happened here? Where are your parents? Sarah's eyes went distant, staring at something beyond the horizon. Mama and Papa, they're gone. The bad men came 3 days ago. They wanted our money but we didn't have any. Papa tried to fight them but... She trailed off, her small body shaking. These bad men, did you recognize any of them? Did they say anything about where they were going? One of them had a scar. Sarah traced a line down her own cheek. Right here. And he wore a silver star on his vest. Sam's blood turned to ice. A badge. She was describing a lawman or someone pretending to be one. In this part of Arizona, that narrowed the possibilities considerably. Sarah, I'm going to take you somewhere safe. But first we need to... He gestured gently toward the bundle in her arms. No. The word came out sharp, desperate. I promised Emma. Before she went to sleep forever, I promised her something. What did you promise? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. She was scared of the dark. Always was. She made me promise that when we buried her, it wouldn't be in some dark, lonely place. She wanted to be near water where she could hear it singing. Like Mama used to sing to us. The girl looked up at Sam with an expression far too old for her young face. There's a river near here, isn't there? I can smell it on the wind. Sam nodded slowly. The Verde River ran through his property about 2 miles north, cutting through a grove of cottonwoods that provided the only real shade for miles around. It was beautiful there. Peaceful. The kind of place where a little girl might rest easy. Please, mister. I know you don't know us and I know we're just strangers to you. But Emma, she deserves better than this place. She deserves somewhere pretty. Sam stared at this remarkable child, this survivor who had endured 3 days in the desert heat with her dead sister in her arms, and felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd kept locked away since the war, since he'd learned that caring about people only led to heartbreak. What's your full name, Sarah? Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. Emma was Emma Rose Mitchell. We're from Kansas, but Mama and Papa said we were going to California to start over. Sam stood, decision made. Well, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, I'm Samuel Garrett, and I own the biggest ranch in this territory. And I give you my word, your sister Emma Rose is going to have the prettiest resting place this side of heaven. The Verde River cut through Sam's land like a silver ribbon, its banks lined with ancient cottonwoods whose roots drank deep from the desert's hidden veins. Sam had chosen this spot for his ranch headquarters 20 years ago precisely because of the water. In Arizona, water meant life and life meant power. Now, as he carried Emma's small body toward the grove while Sarah walked beside him, he found himself seeing the place through different eyes. The way afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of gold and green on the water's surface. The gentle sound of current over smooth stones. The sweet smell of wild roses that grew in impossible abundance along the banks. It was beautiful. He'd forgotten that. Here, Sarah said suddenly, stopping beside a massive cottonwood whose trunk was easily 6 feet across. This is perfect. Emma always loved big trees. She used to say they were like giant umbrellas that God put up to keep little girls safe. Sam knelt and began to dig, using a folding shovel from his saddlebags. The earth was soft here, rich and dark from centuries of river flooding. As he worked, Sarah sat cross-legged beside the growing hole, talking softly to the bundle in her arms. See, Emma? I told you it would be pretty. And listen, can you hear the water singing? Just like Mama used to. Sam's shovel hit something hard. Metal. He frowned and dug more carefully, revealing the corner of what looked like a tin box, about the size of a cigar case. It was old, the metal green with verdigris, but still intact. What's that? Sarah asked, leaning forward with curiosity. Don't know. Sam worked the box free from the earth, noting its weight. Something rattled inside when he shook it. Looks like someone buried this here a long time ago. The box was locked, but the mechanism was so corroded that it broke apart at Sam's touch. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were a dozen letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper was yellowed with age, but the ink was still legible. Sam unfolded the top letter and his world tilted. My dearest Catherine, it began in a familiar hand. I pray this letter finds you well and that you can forgive me for what I must do. The gold shipment from the Prescott mine will pass through Verde Canyon on the 15th, just as we planned. But I cannot go through with it. I cannot steal from innocent people, no matter how much we need the money for our future together. Sam's hands trembled as he read on. The letter was signed, Your devoted James, and dated 15 years ago. James Morrison, his former partner, his best friend, the man who had helped him build this ranch from nothing. The man who had supposedly died in a mining accident in California. Mr. Garrett? Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. You look like you've seen a ghost. Sam folded the letter carefully, his mind racing. James Morrison, alive 15 years ago and planning to rob a gold shipment. James Morrison, who had access to all of Sam's business dealings, who knew every trail and canyon on the ranch. James Morrison, who had disappeared with $5,000 from their joint account, leaving Sam to face bankruptcy alone. Sarah, I need to ask you something and I need you to think very carefully. The man with the scar who attacked your family, did he mention any names? Did he say anything about where he was going? Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating. He called one of the other men Jimmy. And he said something about meeting someone at the old mine. Something about finishing what they started. The old mine. Sam knew it well, an abandoned silver claim about 10 miles north, in the foothills where the desert met the mountains. He bought the land cheap 5 years ago, thinking he might try his hand at mining. But the claim had been worked out decades ago, nothing left but empty tunnels and broken dreams. Or so he'd thought. Sam finished digging Emma's grave as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Sarah had insisted on lining the small hole with smooth river stones and wild roses, creating a bed fit for a princess. As they lowered Emma's body into the earth, Sarah sang a lullaby in a voice clear and sweet as mountain water. Sam found himself thinking of his own sister, Mary, who had died of fever when she was about Emma's age. He'd been too young then to understand death, too frightened to say goodbye properly. "She's safe now," Sarah said as Sam filled in the grave. "Emma always said she wanted to sleep where she could hear angels singing. I think the river sounds like angels, don't you?" Sam nodded, not trusting his voice. He carved Emma's name into the cottonwood's bark with his knife, along with the date and a simple inscription, "Beloved sister, forever in our hearts." As they walked back toward his horse, Sam's mind kept returning to those letters. James Morrison, alive and planning robberies. The timing made sense now. 15 years ago, Sam had been struggling to keep the ranch afloat after a series of bad winters and cattle disease. He'd trusted James with everything, including access to their accounts. "Sarah, you said your family was traveling from Kansas to California. What route were you taking?" "Papa said we were following the old mining road through the mountains. He said it was longer but safer than the main trail." Sarah looked up at him with those two old eyes. "He was wrong, wasn't he? Your papa was trying to protect you. Sometimes the safe choice turns out to be the dangerous one." Sam helped her onto his horse, settling her in front of him. "We're going to my ranch house now. You'll be safe there while I figure out what to do about those men who hurt your family." The ride back gave Sam time to think. The old mining road Sarah mentioned ran right past the abandoned silver claim. If James Morrison was using the mine as a base of operations, it would explain how he'd been able to prey on travelers for years without being caught. The location was perfect, isolated with multiple escape routes through the mountain passes. But why reveal himself now? Why risk exposure by attacking a family with a child who might survive to identify him? Unless he was planning something big. Something that would let him disappear forever. The ranch house came into view as the last light faded from the sky. A sprawling adobe structure that Sam had built to last, with thick walls and deep porches designed to keep out both the desert heat and unwanted visitors. Lamplight glowed in the windows, and smoke rose from the kitchen chimney where his housekeeper, Maria, would be preparing dinner. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, and Sam realized he was seeing his home through her eyes, not as a fortress against the world, but as a place of warmth and safety. Maria met them at the door, her weathered face creasing with concern as she took in Sarah's condition. Without a word, she swept the girl away for a hot bath and clean clothes, leaving Sam alone with his thoughts and the letters that had turned his world upside down. He spread the correspondence across his desk, reading each one carefully. The picture that emerged was of a man torn between love and conscience, planning a crime he couldn't bring himself to commit. The letters spoke of a woman named Catherine, of dreams of a life together, of desperation born from poverty and limited options. But the final letter was different. Dated just 2 weeks before James's supposed death, it was shorter and written in a different tone entirely. "Catherine, I have discovered something that changes everything. Sam's ranch sits on more than just good grazing land. The geological surveys were wrong. There's a vein of silver running right under his property, worth more than we ever dreamed. But I cannot betray him. He saved my life in the war and he trusts me like a brother. I would rather die poor than live rich with his blood on my hands. Forgive me, my love, but I must disappear. It's the only way to keep us both safe from what I might become." Sam leaned back in his chair, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. James hadn't died in California. He'd faked his death to escape the temptation of stealing from his best friend. But something had brought him back. Something had turned the man who couldn't betray a friend into someone who would murder innocent families. What had happened to James Morrison in the 15 years since he'd written that last letter? The next morning brought Sheriff Tom Bradley to Sam's door, his badge glinting in the early sunlight and his face wearing the expression of a man with unpleasant business to conduct. Sam had been expecting this visit. News traveled fast in the territory, and the discovery of the Mitchell family's burned wagon would have reached town by now. "Morning, Sam," Bradley said, tipping his hat. "Heard you found some trouble out on the desert yesterday." "Trouble found me," Sam replied, not inviting the sheriff inside. He'd known Tom Bradley for 10 years, had even voted for him in the last election, but something about the man's demeanor this morning set his teeth on edge. Mind if I ask what you were doing out that way? That's pretty far from your usual range. Checking on strays. Cattle wander when the water holes dry up. Sam kept his voice neutral, but his hand rested casually on his gun belt. Found more than I bargained for. So I heard. Word is you brought back a survivor, a little girl. That's right. Sarah Mitchell. She's been through hell, Tom. Lost her whole family to raiders. Bradley's eyes sharpened. Raiders, you say? She get a good look at them? Good enough. One of them wore a badge according to her. Silver star on his vest. The effect was immediate. Bradley's face went pale, and his hand moved instinctively toward his own badge. Now, Sam, you know how traumatized children can be. Sometimes they see things that aren't there, mix up details. Are you saying she's lying? I'm saying a scared little girl might not be the most reliable witness. Could have been a belt buckle or maybe some kind of military decoration. Lots of men wear silver stars for different reasons. Sam studied the sheriff's face, noting the nervous tick in his left eye, the way he kept glancing toward the house where Sarah was presumably still sleeping. You seem awfully eager to discredit her story, Tom. Any particular reason why? Just trying to keep things in perspective. Can't have folks getting worked up over rumors and half-remembered details. Bradley straightened his shoulders, trying to reassert his authority. I'll need to question the girl myself, of course. Official business. She's been through enough. I won't have you badgering a traumatized child. Sam, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is a law enforcement matter. I have jurisdiction here. On my land. Sam's voice carried a dangerous edge. I don't think so, Tom. The girl is under my protection, and she'll stay that way until I'm satisfied she's safe. Bradley's hand moved closer to his gun. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Sam. I've got a job to do. So do I. And right now, my job is keeping that little girl alive. Sam stepped forward, his presence suddenly filling the doorway. Funny thing, Tom. In all the years I've known you, I've never seen you this interested in witness testimony. Usually you're content to let things slide, especially when it comes to crimes against travelers. What's that supposed to mean? Means maybe it's time someone started asking why so many families have gone missing on the roads through your jurisdiction. Means maybe someone should wonder why you're so eager to silence the first witness who's ever survived to tell the tale. The two men stared at each other across a gulf that had opened in the space of a conversation. Sam could see the calculation in Bradley's eyes, the weighing of options that spoke of a man with secrets to protect. You're making a mistake, Sam, Bradley said finally. A big one. There are forces at work here that you don't understand. Then enlighten me. Bradley shook his head. Some things are better left buried. For everyone's sake. He turned to leave, then paused. That girl, she's not safe here. Not as long as she can identify the men who killed her family. You'd be wise to remember that. As the sheriff rode away, Sam felt the weight of the letters in his pocket and the responsibility of Sarah's life in his hands. The web of corruption was bigger than he'd imagined, reaching into the very institutions meant to protect innocent people. But how deep did it go? And how many people would have to die to keep the secret buried? That afternoon, while Sarah napped in the guest room under Maria's watchful eye, Sam rode out to the abandoned silver mine. The letters had given him a destination, but they hadn't prepared him for what he would find there. The mine entrance was hidden behind a screen of juniper and manzanita, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. But someone had been using it recently. The brush had been cut back and fresh horse tracks led into the narrow canyon that concealed the opening. Sam dismounted and approached on foot, his rifle ready. The mine shaft descended into darkness, but he could see evidence of recent habitation. Fresh torch brackets mounted on the walls, supplies stacked near the entrance, and the lingering smell of coffee and tobacco smoke. He lit a torch and ventured deeper into the tunnels, following the main shaft as it wound into the heart of the mountain. The walls showed signs of old excavation, but also something else. New digging, recent enough that the rock dust still glittered in the torchlight. 20 yards into the mountain, the tunnel opened into a natural cavern that had been converted into a surprisingly comfortable hideout. Bedrolls were arranged around a stone fire ring, and wooden crates served as tables and chairs. Maps covered one wall, showing the major travel routes through the territory, with red marks indicating what Sam now realized were ambush sites. But it was the desk in the corner that drew his attention, a rough table made from planks and sawhorses, covered with papers and ledgers. Sam approached carefully, his torch casting dancing shadows on the cavern walls. The ledgers told a story of systematic robbery and murder spanning 15 years. Names, dates, amounts stolen, all recorded in meticulous detail. The Mitchell family was just the latest entry, their meager possessions listed alongside dozens of other victims. But it was the signature at the bottom of each page that stopped Sam's heart. James Morrison. His old friend, his former partner, the man he'd mourned as dead for 15 years. "Hello, Sam." The voice came from behind him, calm and familiar despite the years that had passed. Sam turned slowly, his rifle still in his hands but not yet raised. James Morrison stood in the cavern entrance, silhouetted against the afternoon light. He was older, grayer, with new lines around his eyes and a hardness to his features that hadn't been there before. But it was unmistakably the man who had once saved Sam's life in a Confederate prison camp, who had helped him build a ranch from nothing, who had been closer than a brother. "Hello, James. I was wondering when you'd show up." "Were you now?" James stepped into the cavern, his own rifle held casually but ready. "And here I thought I'd managed to stay dead all these years." "The letters gave you away. Catherine must have meant a lot to you to risk keeping them all this time." James's face softened slightly. "She did. More than life itself. More than honor or friendship or any of the other things I used to think mattered." "What happened to her?" "Consumption. Died 5 years after I disappeared in a charity ward in San Francisco. Alone." James's voice carried a bitterness that cut like acid. "All those years I stayed away to protect her, to keep her from being tainted by what I might become. And she died anyway, poor and forgotten." Sam felt a stab of sympathy for his old friend, but it was tempered by the knowledge of what James had become. "So you decided to become exactly what you were afraid of becoming." "I'm being smart. Smart enough to know that girl is the only thing keeping me alive right now." Sam's voice carried clearly across the yard. "You kill her, you kill the only witness to your crimes. But you kill me, and those letters I wrote get delivered to some very interested parties." There was a long silence from the yard. Sam could imagine Bradley and his men weighing their options, calculating the risks of a direct assault against a fortified position. "What letters?" Bradley called finally. "The ones that detail 15 years of robbery and murder. The ones that name names and provide dates. The ones that explain how a supposedly dead man named James Morrison has been running a criminal organization with the help of corrupt law enforcement." Another silence, longer this time. Then Sam heard the sound of horses moving, circling the house. They were positioning themselves for an attack. "Sarah," he whispered, "I need you to go to the root cellar. There's a tunnel that leads to the barn. If something happens to me, you follow that tunnel and ride my fastest horse to town. Find Father Miguel and tell him to send those letters." "I don't want to leave you," Sarah said, her voice small but determined. "I know, sweetheart. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is run away to fight another day." The first shot shattered the front window, sending glass cascading across the floor. Sam returned fire, his bullet taking one of the attackers from his saddle. The battle for Sarah Mitchell's life had begun. As gunfire erupted around the ranch house, Sam found himself facing the choice that James had laid before him with brutal clarity. He could surrender Sarah, join the organization, and keep his ranch, built though it was on stolen land. Or he could fight, likely die, and watch everything he'd worked for crumble to dust. But as he looked at Sarah's frightened face in the muzzle flashes, Sam realized the choice wasn't really about land or money or even survival. It was about the kind of man he wanted to be when the final accounting came. He'd spent 20 years building an empire on a lie, but he didn't have to spend the rest of his life perpetuating that lie with murder. "Sarah," he said, reloading his rifle as bullets splintered the door frame. "I want you to know something. Whatever happens tonight, you're the bravest person I've ever met. Your sister would be proud of you. Mr. Garrett. And I want you to know that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. Especially then." Sam stood and moved to the shattered window, his rifle ready. In the yard, he could see James Morrison dismounting, walking toward the house with his hands raised. "Sam," James called. "Let's end this. Just you and me, like it should have been from the beginning." Sam looked back at Sarah one more time, memorizing her face. Then he opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, his rifle trained on the man who had once been his closest friend. "Hello, James. Come to finish what you started. Come to give you one last chance. The girl for your life and your ranch. It's a fair trade." "No," Sam said quietly. "It's not." The final confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. James Morrison, the man who had saved Sam's life in a Confederate prison camp, drew his gun with the speed of someone who had spent 15 years living by violence. Sam was faster. The shot echoed across the desert like thunder, and James Morrison fell to the dust of the ranch yard, his dreams of empire dying with him. The other gunmen, leaderless and facing a man who had nothing left to lose, melted away into the darkness like shadows before the dawn. Sheriff Bradley tried to run, but Sam's second shot took him from his horse before he'd gone 50 yards. Some debts could only be paid in blood. In the aftermath, as federal marshals arrived to clean up the remnants of Morrison's organization, Sam sat on his porch with Sarah, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and crimson. The letters had done their work. The corruption had been exposed, the guilty punished, the innocent protected. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, her small hand in his calloused one. "Now we rebuild," Sam said. "The ranch will have to go back to the Apache Nation. It was never really mine to begin with. But there's other land, other opportunities. And you'll need a home, a family. Will you be my family?" Sam looked down at this remarkable child who had survived hell and emerged with her courage intact, who had taught him that some things were worth more than land or money or even life itself. "If you'll have me," he said. "If you'll have a broken-down old rancher who's finally learned the difference between building an empire and building a home." Sarah smiled, the first truly happy expression he'd seen on her face since he'd found her in the desert. "I think Emma would like that. She always said families were made of love, not blood." As they sat together in the growing light, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years, peace. He'd lost his ranch, his fortune, everything he'd thought mattered. But he'd gained something infinitely more valuable, the knowledge that when the final test came, he'd chosen honor over profit, love over fear, truth over comfortable lies. In the distance, the Verde River sang its eternal song, and somewhere beneath the cottonwoods, a little girl named Emma Rose Mitchell rested in the shade of angels' wings. Some graves, Sam reflected, were worth digging. And some promises were worth keeping no matter the cost. If this tale of courage in the face of impossible odds moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Next week, we'll explore another untold story from the American frontier, the preacher's daughter who outgunned the devil himself. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, in a world full of easy choices, sometimes the hardest decision is the only one worth making.